My parents tried to sneak my inheritance to their favorite daughter, but my grandparents caught on and set up a surprise for them. After the will was read, my sister was furious and blamed everyone. So now you decide to show up? Her voice was cold, nothing like the warm tones that had comforted me throughout my childhood. Grandma, what's going on? They told me you were in a nursing home. The words tumbled out as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Don't, she held up her hand, and the gesture felt like a physical blow. Your grandfather called you over and over. He was asking for you on his deathbed, wanting to say goodbye to his little scientist. But you couldn't be bothered to answer his calls or visit him. How could you be so cruel, Nellie? Let me see the number he was calling, I said, my voice fairly steady. Please, Grandma, I need to understand. Grandma disappeared inside for a moment and returned with a small notepad. Her hands were shaking as she showed me the number scribbled in Grandpa's familiar handwriting. That's not my number, I whispered, staring at the unfamiliar digits. I've had the same number since high school. They gave you a fake number. What do you mean, fake number? Grandma's stern expression began to crack. Your parents said you changed it when you went to university. They said you wanted to distance yourself from us. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Grandma, I came here during break. Emma was here. She wouldn't let me in. She said no one was home. Then Mom and Dad told me you and Grandpa were in a nursing home. Grandma's face went pale. Nursing home? We never. Emma and your parents told us you were too busy with your new university life to visit. They said. Her voice cracked. They said you were ashamed of us, that we weren't sophisticated enough for you anymore. They said what? My knees felt weak. How could they, Grandma? They told me the funeral was at 2 p.m. today. When I got to the church, it was already over. They said I mixed up the times, but I didn't. I would never. The funeral was at 10 a.m., Grandma said slowly, realization dawning in her eyes. Your parents stood there and told everyone how ashamed they were that you couldn't even be bothered to come to your own grandfather's funeral. Emma was crying about how she tried so hard to reach you. I fell into her arms, both of us dissolving into tears on the front porch. All the pain, all the confusion, all the manufactured distance between us poured out as we held each other. He died thinking I abandoned him, I sobbed into her shoulder. Grandpa died thinking I didn't care. Grandma stroked my hair like she used to when I was little, her own tears falling. We know the truth now. We know. After we dried our tears, Grandma picked up the phone with a determined look on her face. Her fingers trembled slightly as she dialed, but her voice was steady when she spoke. Linda, yes, it's me. I need you, Robert, and Emma to come over right away. There are some important documents we need to discuss. No, it can't wait. Wait, they'll be here in an hour, Grandma said, hanging up the phone. I told them I had important documents to discuss. The lawyer is on his way too. When the doorbell rang, Grandma squeezed my hand. Stay in the kitchen until I call you. I heard them enter, Mom's practiced social laugh, Dad's formal greetings, Emma's bored sigh, then Grandma's voice, unusually sharp. Please, everyone, take a seat. Mr. Harrison is here to read George's will. That was my cue. I stepped into the living room just as the lawyer was opening his briefcase. The looks on their faces were unforgettable, Mom's perfect smile frozen in place, Dad's face draining of color, Emma's mouth hanging open in shock. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat and began reading. I, George Walker, being of sound mind, declare this to be my last will and testament. The room was silent except for the rustle of papers. First came the house, left to Grandma, along with a substantial sum for her ongoing care and maintenance. Then came the surprise that made Emma's face turn red with anger. To my granddaughter, Nellie Walker, I leave my newly constructed laboratory facility at 1420 Pine Street, fully equipped and ready for her research work. All necessary permits and paperwork have been processed and finalized. I couldn't believe my ears. Grandpa had built me a lab, my own research facility. The remainder of my estate, Mr. Harrison continued, is to be divided equally between my granddaughters, Nellie and Emma Walker. Emma's chair scraped against the floor as she stood up abruptly, but Grandma raised her hand. There's more, she said, pulling out a letter. Your grandfather wanted this read as well. Where should we put this one, Grandpa? I would ask each time I brought home a new trophy or diploma. In the box with the others? I'd say, pulling out my special cardboard box from under the bed. I never displayed my awards, partly because I didn't want to seem boastful, but mostly because I knew they made my parents uncomfortable. Emma, of course, had her own take on my success. Nobody likes a know-it-all, she'd sneer, but then turn around and say, hey, can you help me with my science homework? And maybe just do it for me. Emma, that's cheating, I protested. Nellie, help your sister right now, Mom would inevitably command. Family helps family. So, I'd end up doing Emma's work, feeling like a fraud but too afraid to stand up to my parents. It became a pattern. Emma would demand, my parents would insist, and I would comply. I often overheard my parents talking about me when they thought I wasn't listening. Their whispered conversations floated up the stairs to my room, where I'd sit with my chemistry set or the latest research paper I was studying. I just don't understand where she gets it from, Mom would say. No one in our family is like this. Maybe she was switched at birth. Dad would joke, but the undertone of seriousness in his voice hurt more than if he meant it as a pure jest. One evening, after I won another science competition, I heard Dad's voice from his study. He was talking to Emma about her struggling grades. It's not fair that she's so smart, I overheard him say. Listen, sweetheart, we need to focus on you. Nellie, well, she'll be fine on her own. I pressed my back against the wall, fighting back tears. They thought they were justifying their neglect with twisted logic, as if being capable somehow meant I didn't need love or support. At school, I was that weird girl who spent lunch breaks in the laboratory instead of the cafeteria. Sure, people would come to me for help with their science homework, but real friendships, those were rare. Grandma and Grandpa were my rocks. They'd listen for hours as I explained my latest experiments or theories. They never made me feel like I was too much or too different. Look what I found for you, Grandpa, I'd say, pulling out scientific journals or new equipment for my experiments. I thought this might interest you. But despite having my grandparents' support, the hole in my heart where my parents' love should have been felt vast and empty. I'd watch other families at school events, parents proudly hugging their kids, siblings supporting each other, and feel a deep ache in my chest. Then came the news that would change everything. I was graduating early, at 16. I'd completed all my high school requirements and had been offered a full scholarship to one of the top universities in the country. The day I left for university felt like breathing fresh air for the first time. The campus was buzzing with energy, and for once, I wasn't the odd one out. In my advanced chemistry class, I met Sarah and Michael, who got just as excited about molecular structures as I did. For the first time in my life, I had friends who understood me. We'd spend hours in the lab, bouncing ideas off each other, getting excited about discoveries that would make most people's eyes glaze over. But even as I thrived in my new environment, a part of me still yearned for my families. You can click on share and more to see if there is a part 2.